Hi guys, welcome back to the home at Homestead. Today we will be doing part 2 of a 3-part series of green bean preservation, and for today's video we will be going over how to pressure can green beans. We'll be doing the fresh pack method and we'll be using the stovetop pressure canner. If you watched part 1 of the series, we did fresh pack water bath canning of the green beans because we did dilly beans. And by pickling and using the vinegar, that provided the acid which made the pH safe for water bath canning of the green beans. Now for today, when we do the fresh pack green beans, you'll need to use a pressure canner for preservation of this. And these will be great for in the future for green bean casserole or just a side dish of green beans. And once you've had a homemade canned green bean, you probably won't want to go back to the store-bought canned green beans. So what we'll do to start is the green beans we have here, I have these all sorted. These are ready to be split into the size I want canned, and these are a little thicker and woodier. I'll shell these and we'll can those separately as well. So let's head over and get these green beans prepped for the jars. So for the green beans that we'll just be canning for things like the green bean casserole or a side dish of green beans, we'll just kind of snap them or cut them into the desired size and place them directly into the canning jar. Now if you notice any sort of string that remains, just remove that with a little paring knife. Just kind of cut at an angle and slide down. And then just place them right into the jars. You want to make sure that your beans are all nice and clean. So these have all been thoroughly washed because we're doing the fresh pack method. Most of these should be all ready to go because I prepped them the other day. So you just use a knife or you can just use your fingers and just kind of break them into the size you want. So we'll work on filling these jars first. We'll see how many we can fill today. And then I'll work on shelling or shucking these coarse green beans. The pods are very thick and woody, and when you squeeze them, they have kind of a hollow feeling, and when you open them up, you have these nice white, plump green beans. So you just shell them, and they end up looking like this. So what I'll do with those is I'll can them separately. I'll probably fill a pint or two just with those, and that'll be nice for adding to soups or chilies or maybe even a cold bean salad, because then they won't have the pods or the shells at all. Okay, so I have a dozen of the pint jars filled with the green beans, and I still have a little bit left. So let me add a few more jars. My stovetop pressure canner today holds up to 18 regular mouth pint jars, so I still have room to spare in the canner. So we'll add some more jars here. Okay, so we have 14 pint jars filled with fresh packed green beans. So now, well, I'll finish shucking these other green beans that they were rather ripe, and the outer pod is rather thick and woody. So you just pop them open and shell them. If you just have a few, you can sprinkle some on the top of each jar, but I have quite a few here, so I'm planning to just can them in a jar or two by themselves. So I'll just finish shelling these and then we'll add them to the jars and move on to the next step. Okay, so the green beans have been all shelled and we have the nice fresh beans here. Let's fill a couple of pint jars with these. So you want to fill to about a 1-inch head space. Okay, so this didn't quite fill this pint jar, so what I'm going to do is just sprinkle a little bit of the extra loose beans into each of the jars. Now to each jar we will add a half teaspoon of canning salt. Salt is optional. This is not necessary for the preservation of the beans. It's just for flavor and taste preference. But if you're going to add salt, do a canning salt. If you want, you can do half with and half without and see which you prefer. Okay. Now off to the side I have a kettle boiling some water. And to each of these jars we will add some hot water up to 1-inch headspace. So if you have a headspace tool, you can use that and place this on the jar rim. It has 1/4, half, 3/4, and 1 inch. And the other end of this tool is actually a bubble removal tool, and I'll slide this along the sides to remove any bubbles that may form. But first we'll fill up with the hot water. And we'll probably have to do a few rounds of the kettle water. And that's how you prep the green beans with the fresh pack method for pressure canning. All right, I'll refill this and get this next batch of hot water going. So I'll take the headspace tool and use the other end for the bubble removal and just slide it along the sides and through it a little bit, and that'll just get any bubbles out. There might be some little air pockets from when you were placing the beans in there. Remove the bubbles again, just kind of sliding along the edges. And you'll see little bubbles kind of float up from where there were little spaces between the green beans. And after you do so, if you need to add a little more water, you can do that so you get the proper headspace. Now we'll just take a wet paper towel and wipe along the rims here. Now we'll add the lids and the rings. So you'll place the lid on, followed by the ring, just finger tight. And the ring just holds the lid in place while it's processing, so that once it's cooling and it seals, the lid will suction down and the ring can be easily removed and saved for other canning projects in the future. So I just turned the burner on for my stovetop pressure canner because these jars are just, they're warm from the boiling water that we used from the kettle. So you want the jars to go into a canner that's slightly warmed as well. But since it's fresh pack method, you don't want it to be incredibly hot. All right, so let's get these into the pressure canner. So here's the pressure canner, and I have it set up on the side burner here. And I can link in the description box below both the pressure canner and the burner, as well as some other pressure canner options. This is the Mirro 22-quart pressure canner, and this has the weighted style. There's also, Presto makes a stovetop 23-quart, and that has a gauge style. So it has the numbers on top, on a little gauge. So what I did was, for this particular pressure canner, 2 quarts of water go in. So I have that in. There's a little canning tray that you place the jars on. This particular canner comes with an additional tray, so you can do stack method. And you put that down, and then we'll put the top layer on. And this will hold 18 regular mouth pint jars. Just do a little rotating here to get them all in. There we are. So now what we'll do is we will place the lid on the pressure canner. On the side of the lid there's a little arrow here, and there's an arrow on the black handle. So you line up the arrow, kind of press it down a little bit and slide it till these black handles line up. Now it's all set and closed. So what we'll do is we'll bring this up to pressure. We'll wait until a steady stream of steam comes from this little valve here for 10 minutes. So we'll wait for this to build pressure and we'll come back and move on to the next step. So while the pressure canner comes up to pressure, I'll do some other little projects around the kitchen. Overnight, I did a large batch of fresh herbs. I did some parsley and chives, and I also did some basil. And I have a new little toy here. It's a little personal size smoothie maker or blender. And I got this initially to make smoothies in the morning, but I thought this would work really well for when I dehydrate fresh herbs, and it did. So it ground up the basil nice and small, and it took just a few seconds to do. And then that way I didn't have to dirty the food processor or my mortar and pestle, and did it in a few seconds. So that was really nice. I can link that in the description box below. It's kind of fun when you find a new gadget that works well, and I'm not sure if you want to add that to your kitchen as well, but I thought I'd mention that. So what I'll do now is I'll take the parsley off of the stumps here, and I'll add this to this snap top jar, and I'll cut down the chives and add that to this one, and then the basil I'll add to this little spice jar, and then I'll add an oxygen absorber pack to the parsley because that's a new jar that I'm starting for the dehydrated parsley. So I'll just kind of work on this while the pressure canner is getting ready and building pressure, and then we can move on to the next step for canning the green beans. Okay, so the pressure canner has been raising steam from this little tab for about 10 minutes. So now we'll add a 10-pound weight here. So that'll put it to 10 psi, and that all is based on your altitude. And this little button raised up showing that it's sealed and the pressure is built to the desired psi based on this weight here. Now what I meant when I said that it's based on your altitude, in the Ball Blue Book there is an altitude chart, and for pressure canning here it shows based on your altitude in feet. You use either this weighted gauge, or if you have a dial gauge, then you go to this psi when pressure canning. So with the fresh pack green beans in the pint jars, it is a 20-minute pressure canning time. So I'll set a timer for that, and we'll let these process. Okay, so the processing time is finished, but I want to catch how this pressure canner releases any excess steam that may develop inside of itself. And that little spinning around of this little top here and release that steam, that is how this canner actually removes excess pressure in there, so it stays at the proper setting, and that is normal. So if you see that when you're pressure canning or you haven't done it before, don't be alarmed, that's normal. That is how this model and this version of pressure canners works. So what I did now is I turned off the burner. We will let this come down of pressure, and when that happens, this little tab here will drop down, and when I remove the weight, there will be no excess steam and things like that released when I remove it. So this usually takes about an hour or so. So we'll let this cool down, release any excess steam, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so the pressure canner has come down to pressure. The little red tab dropped down, so I can remove the weight off the top. There's no steam or anything else burnt out, so we know that it has released its pressure. So all we'll do is do a little slight turn so that the arrows line up again. Remove the lid, tilt it away from you, just so that the steam doesn't come right into your face. Now we will move these canning jars over to the cooling and sealing area. I usually let them sit in the canner for about 5 minutes or so, and then we'll take a peek and see how the green beans look. Alright, so here are the green beans off to the cooling and sealing area. So now we'll let them cool for the next 12 to 24 hours, and we'll let them seal. After that time is elapsed, I'll double check that they all sealed properly, and I'll label them and put them down into cold storage. So let's take a closer look at the green beans. Okay, so here's a closer look of the pressure canned green beans. Here is the can, oh there, one just sealed. Here is the jar of the shelled green beans, and they all They look nice. I don't see any huge loss of liquid to suggest siphoning. So now we can use these for green bean casserole or soups or as a side dish with dinner. And the shelled green beans I can use for soups or chili or cold bean salads as well. So watch for more videos on green bean preservation as well as other food preservation videos I have. And as items from the garden come to ripen and are harvested, I'll have videos showing what I do with those produce items as well. You can check out part 1, which is dilly beans, and down the road farther we'll do part 3, which will be the seed saving method. I'm letting the green beans that remain on the plants, I'm allowing them to further ripen and dry out, and once they reach the proper stage I will harvest them and do a video on how to preserve the green beans for planting next year in the garden. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video today, as well as our time together in the kitchen. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. See you next time. Take care.